I'm going to say something that might piss you off. The most lost people I know are the ones that are obsessed with this idea of finding themselves. They quit at everything the moment that it gets hard. They call the phase self discovery, but I think it's just running. And I can say that because that was me. For years, I believed this little beautiful lie that everyone repeats like a mantra. Your 20s is for finding yourself. Sounds deep, and it sounds spiritual. But here's what I found the hard way. You can spend so much of your time finding yourself that you never actually become anything. I am not here to tell you you've got the time in the world to find whatever you're looking for. I'm here to show you how that mindset of I'm in the phase of finding myself almost destroyed me and why you need to kill it before it destroys you. If that pisses you off, good, then we need to hear this. I want to take you in one moment of my life. I was 23 years old. I was living in my one bedroom apartment in Tucson, Arizona. And I was working at this accounting job and I was doing taxes. It was around 1 in the morning. I was laying on my air mattress on the floor. There was pizza boxes in the room. There was scattered everywhere. 2 mug cups on my desk with dried coffee crusted at the bottom. And laundry was right in the corner. I can remember this vividly. Laundry was right in the corner. It's been sitting there in a pile so long that I just keep grabbing from the top and pretending it was clean. It was disgusting, I know. It lit up and one notification came from a bank. It said your account is below $50. And one notification came from a friend from my soccer club, but I didn't open any of those notifications. Instead, what I did was open Instagram, like we all do, right? I opened Instagram and I start scrolling. I see people I went to school with. One got a promotion, another was posting sunrise pictures in Italy, caption saying, finding myself. And another person also got engaged. My chest tightened a little bit, you know? You know that feeling, that wave of panic that you feel that is very quiet, but it doesn't show on your face, but makes your stomach kind of twist a little bit. That's what I felt. And my brain goes straight to the script that I always told myself. It's okay. I'm just in a season of figuring things out. I'm not behind. I'm just finding myself. But if I had paused right there in that room, I had paused at that moment and asked myself, what was I actually doing? I was not building anything and I was not deciding. Just laying down there in the dark, doing nothing, avoiding my bank account, avoiding my friends, and avoiding my life. The crazy part is, from the outside, I'm an immigrant, by the way. And it's crazy that when you're an immigrant, like, everybody expects you to be strong. Everybody doesn't expect you to go through troubles such as this. But do you have to be stressful? Everything is okay. You are in a land that is full of opportunities. You got to figure it out. So as an immigrant, you're not allowed to get in that phase. Just get what you're given, right? But that's not how it works, especially when you want to live the best life that you can. You don't want to waste your time doing something that you don't want to do. So on the outside, everything looked perfect. Everything looked perfect from the outside. I was in a new city. I was planning on actually talking about quitting my job at the time. I didn't quit, but I was talking about quitting my job because I didn't like it. I wasn't fulfilled. I told everyone that I was on the process of honoring my journey. And people said, well, man, that's courageous. And some of the friend group that I found up in Tucson who were in the same phase of their life were like, man, you're brave. You know, they appreciated that and they were good friends. But the truth that I couldn't say then is this: I wasn't courageous. I was scared. I was scared to commit. I was scared that if I picked wrong, I would get stuck forever. I had broken up with my girlfriend at the time, and you can guess the reasoning behind it. I needed to discover myself and explore. And it was a great relationship because I wanted to explore. I wanted to, quote unquote, find myself. So I went on these strings of dates, nothing serious, anything but commitment. I wrapped my fear in pretty language: alignment, authenticity, finding myself. Under all that noise, there was this small, ugly thought that I couldn't silence. What if I was not exploring? What if I was just running away from anything that asks me to grow? I didn't have an answer that night. No. But that question, it wouldn't leave me alone. because that discomfort that I felt in that moment, that was the beginning of actual change in my life. Here's the paradox I started to see. People who are the most obsessed with finding themselves were the most lost. Always, these kind of people always started over. They always moved cities. They always changed jobs. They are always quote unquote rebranding. Meanwhile, the people who seemed the most grounded, they weren't talking about self-discovery at all. They were showing up at the same craft every single day. They were raising kids, they were building careers, they were serving at the church or their community, honoring the commitment, even when they didn't feel like it. They didn't quote unquote find themselves first. They lost themselves in something bigger, and identity showed up as a side effect. It's almost like there's this built-in rule of God. The more you cling to an idea of my true self, the more anxious and confused you become. The more you give yourself something meaningful, the more solid you feel. Later, I realized that Jesus actually said something along the same lines. He said, whoever tries to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life will find it. But even if you never open the Bible, you can see it in real life as well. The artist who gives themselves to their craft for 10 years doesn't wonder who they are. The nurse who has been caring for people for a decade isn't asking, what's my identity? The carpenter who stayed in the trade long enough to get good at it doesn't need a personality test to tell him who he is. They are not obsessed with who am I. They are busy being someone. Here's what nobody tells you about finding yourself. It is a luxury belief. You can only afford to quote unquote find yourself if you have a safety net. Parents who allow you to move back, a partner who will be covering bills. If you're an immigrant like myself, if you don't have a backup plan, you don't get to find yourself. You get to build yourself because you have to survive. And the crazy part is, those people, the ones who did not have the luxury of endless exploration, they are way less anxious than we are. They are more grounded. They are more clear. They are more confident. Why? Because they didn't spend years agonizing over who they are. They just did what needed to be done. And through doing it, they became someone. I met this guy once. He was a carpenter in Tucson while I was going through that whole process. He had been doing it for 30 years. I asked him actually, I was like, did you always know this was your thing? He laughed and he said, hell no. Excuse my language. He said, hell no. I needed rent money. So I took an apprenticeship when I was just 19. I hated it for the first 2 years. I was terrible at it. And my hands were always cut up. My back always hurt. And I wanted to quit every single day. So why didn't you quit? I asked him. He said, well, because I needed the money. So I kept showing up. And somehow around year 3, I realized I was actually good at it. And once I got good, I started liking it. And now I can't imagine doing anything else. This story kind of spoke to me because it reminded me of my years in high school. I hated mathematics. I was terrible at it. I would do so good in other subjects, but mathematics was my weak spot. Now, I needed to pass mathematics for me to pass my grade 12. Mathematics is actually one of the big 5 at that time. It was one of the big 5 subjects that you needed to clear for you to have a certificate. And I was terrible at it. So what did I do? I dedicated hours and hours of practice, of repetition, of learning formulas and concepts so I can pass mathematics. And this went on for a good number of years. For 2 years, from 10th grade and 11th grade, I was not good. In fact, I was just mediocre and sometimes even bad. But in the third year, 12th grade, I became one of the best students in mathematics in my class. And I actually loved it. I loved it so much so that I went ahead and pursued accounting, which is math based. And my point is, maybe you do not um maybe you do not hate that skill or that thing that you are avoiding. Maybe you're just not good at it yet, and the only thing that you hate is the boredom that comes and the embarrassment that comes for being inadequate at that thing. So that story of the carpenter really spoke to me because I had been doing the exact same opposite because along somewhere along the way I forgot that idea. And there's a saying by Alex Amosi that says people more often than not needs to be reminded than taught. And that conversation with that carpenter really spoke to me. It reminded me of what I had forgotten a long time ago when I was, what, 17 years old. I was waiting to feel passionate before I committed, waiting to love something before I showed up for it. And that's backwards. You don't find what you love and then commit to it. You commit, and through the commitment, you discover what you are capable of. And that's when love shows up. Passion isn't the starting point, it's the reward for discipline. The Bible actually says this, but in a way that sounds a little bit harsher, which is why I like the Bible because it gives it to you as it is. No cutting corners at all. The Bible says, whoever wants to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life will save it. Translation, how I translate this is stop trying to preserve some imaginary authentic self. Let it die. Commit to something bigger than your feelings. Commit to something bigger, and that's where you will actually become someone. Now, let me be fair here for a second before you think that I'm saying exploration is always bad or that travel is a waste of time. That's not what I'm saying. There are people who took a year off, traveled, and then came back with clarity that they didn't have before, and more power to them. And that's great. There are people who quit a soul crushing job, tried 5 different things, and finally discovered what they were meant to do. And that's great. And there are moments where stepping back, getting space, and exploring is exactly what you need. So then what's the difference? Well, the difference is intent. Here's the thing. Are you exploring towards something or running away from something? That's the real test. That's the real question you need to ask yourself. Are you exploring towards something or running away from something? Because there's a massive difference between I am going to travel for 6 months, work remotely, try different things, and see what resonates with me, but I'm coming back with a plan. And I don't know what I am doing right now with my life. So I'm going to Bali or wherever you want to go, and hoping that the universe gives me a sign. One has direction, and the other is just expensive avoidance. The person who quits their job to start a business, that's not running, that's risk. The person who moves cities to chase a specific opportunity, that's not avoidance, that's pursuit. The person who takes a gap year to volunteer, to learn a language, to develop a new skill, that's not drifting, that's investing. But the people who've been exploring for the last 3 years with no commitment, no skills, and no direction, that is not self discovery, that is self deception. And here's how you know which one you are. Ask yourself, if I keep doing what I am doing right now, where will I be in 2 years? If the answer is more grounded, more skilled, and more clear, you are exploring. If the answer is probably still figuring it out, then you are avoiding. Look, I am not anti exploration. I am not anti travel. I am not anti self discovery. I am anti hiding behind exploration as an excuse to never commit to anything because I have been both versions. I have seen the guy who backpacked Southeast Asia for a year, came back and launched a nonprofit helping kids in the village. That's purpose driven. And I have seen the person who's been finding themselves for the last 5 years, bouncing from city to city, job to job, relationship to relationship, and they are more lost now than when they started. So the question isn't, should I explore or should I commit? The real question is, am I using exploration to discover something or to avoid building something? Be honest with yourself, because exploration without intention is just wandering, and wandering doesn't build anything. The truth is, most of what we call finding ourselves is just fear with better marketing. It looks like this job doesn't feel aligned, so you quit before you ever get good at it. It feels like I'm not sure this relationship is the one, so you leave before you ever learn to love someone for who they truly are and allow them to love you for who you truly are. It also looks like this project doesn't feel like me anymore, so you abandon the project the second it stops feeling exciting. We tell ourselves we are searching, but what we're truly doing is escaping, especially when things start getting hard. Because that point where you escape, it's uncomfortable. You don't become patient without being forced to wait. You don't become disciplined without doing things you don't like doing. You don't become committed without staying when everything in you wants to run. Identity isn't something that you discover in a coffee shop in a foreign country. It is something that gets hammered into your brain through repetition. You build it by showing up, staying put, and letting the process change you in the process. Nobody told me this part. Nobody. Every time I hit reset, every time I started a new job, a new relationship, a new phase, you don't get back to zero. You don't start from zero. You go back with more doubts because there's a small voice in the back of your head that goes, we've been here before. We get excited, we last 6 months, and we bail. While you're cycling through that whole phase, something else is happening. The friend who stayed at the boring job, they are quietly becoming excellent at it. The person who stuck with the same person, they are learning how to love at a depth that you haven't touched yet. And I'm not saying stay in an abusive relationship. No, that's not what I'm saying. Get me right. I'm saying there are times when you are not supposed to leave a relationship, because most relationships fail because you fail to be intimate with another person. Things are starting to get serious, so you are scared to be vulnerable with that person. So you leave before they leave you. You are full of insecurity, so you don't want to expose that. So to let that person in, so you leave before anything gets serious. If a relationship is abusive, please leave. So that's not what I'm saying. That person who sticks with the same partner and learns to go through the ups and downs with that partner, they are learning how to love that person in a depth that you will not see if you choose not to commit. Your friend or someone that you know who chose one path and chose to walk it for 5 years, they have momentum that you cannot fake. Your 20s is not a trial period where nothing counts. They are your foundational years. The concrete is still wet. You can still shape it. Yes, you can change your life when you're 30, 40, or 50, but the interest rate on those decisions right now in your 20s is insane. Every bit of discipline compounds, every act of commitment compounds, and every choice to stay when it's hard compounds. And while you are exploring, time is still moving. So, what do you actually do with this? Not some fluffy, believe in yourself answer, real and comfortable action. Step one, name the thing that you have been avoiding. Not the thing that you say you've been working on, the thing you've kept at arm's length, the job you've been half-assing, excuse my language, the relationship you won't fully commit to and show up in all the ways it's asking you to, the craft you start and abandon every few months the moment it gets hard, the calling from God you keep researching but never execute. Number two, commit to something for 90 days, not forever, just 90 days. For 90 days, the rule is I don't quit because of my feelings. I adjust because of wisdom. I get information and I make a decision. You are allowed to tweak. You are allowed to learn. You are not allowed to run, just because it gets uncomfortable. Step 3, let someone else hold the mirror up for you. Here's the part that will sting a little. Text a friend, text someone who knows you well, and ask them, what is one thing you think I keep avoiding? For me, I told my wife, there's something I've been avoiding is just writing my exams for my EA exam and my CPA exam. I've been starting and I've been putting it off. So that is something I've been putting at arm's length and I've been avoiding it because it requires a certain amount of mental capacity. And I just got out of school and I don't want to be studying all the time. I want to study for a few hours, but this requires me to be in a student mode until I pass that exam because the material is just so dense. And I've been putting it off because it's going to be hard. The same thing with this podcast. I do it and I stop. I do it and I stop. So I'm letting someone hold my mirror app. And what I do is I'll just shut up and I listen. So do the same. Tell someone to hold the mirror up for you. Shut up and listen to them. Don't explain, don't defend, don't justify, just listen. That answer might hurt you, but it might also be the clearest picture of where you need to finally stop finding yourself and start building something. Now, sit with me here for a second. Ask yourself this. What have I been calling self-discovery that is actually just me avoiding discipline and commitment? Not in theory, be specific. You already know the answer. You have known the answer for months. The only question now is, what are you going to do about it? You're not lost. And I'll say this with my chest up. You're not lost. You're underdeveloped. And underdeveloped isn't fixed by more searching. It's fixed by more staying. Stop trying to find yourself. Start choosing who you're going to become. Identity is not discovered. It is forged. One decision, one habit, one commitment at a time. Thanks for hanging out with me today. If this really spoke to you, send it to someone you love, a friend, a family member who is always starting over. And next week, I want to talk about something even harder to admit. And most of the stuff that I talk about here is something that I've gone through or I'm going through at the moment. So something that has been hard to admit is why I keep restarting the same 6 months of my life and why my fresh starts are actually destroying my progress. If that's you, and if this episode made you uncomfortable, then this is the coming episode. The next episode is going to expose the part of you that keeps self-sabotaging your own momentum. You don't want to miss it. Until next time, stay rooted and get to work.